Hello everyone, it's me, DevilArtemis. So in my last video, I spent some time talking about Death Battle and what makes it so special to me. But it turns out Bionicle lore is impossible to summarize, so I wasn't able to spend as much time on it as I wanted. So to make up for that, hi, I'm YouTube celebrity Wilbur H. Force, and here's why Machamp vs. Goro is a perfect death battle. I'm not saying it's the best episode, even though it is. No, the best episode of Death Battle is the one you like the most. Machamp vs. Goro is perfect in that structurally, every part of the episode does exactly what it needs to do. It all starts with the character analyses. This is what takes up the bulk of any episode's runtime. The part where they analyze their weapons, armor, and skill to find out who would win. The way I see it, the analysis just has one thing it needs to accomplish. It needs to convince me that this is going to be a good fight. Everything should push me towards this. It doesn't matter if this is your first time watching or if you already gave them $200 for the Kickstarter. A good analysis will make you feel one thing, and that is hype for the fight. Most episodes do this in a couple different ways. The most obvious is to show off the cool stuff the characters can do and how hard they can do it. Goro can breathe fire and use weapons and do a big stomp. Machamp can use knockoff and rock smash and do a big throw. Goro has 3 billion joules of energy. Machamp can punch faster than the speed of sound. It's a good way to show off what makes the characters cool and get you excited to see the cool guys doing cool stuff in the cool fight. But you can't show off all of it. This is where the infamous fighter with the fewer calcs wins rule comes from. With a few exceptions, a rundown should give you just enough information about both fighters that you're not entirely sure which one is going to take it. And that's why a good analysis also gets you to pick a side. Like I mentioned in my last video, I didn't know anything about Ezra or Zoro when I started watching their episode. But by the time the fight started, I was all in on Team Zoro. I was going to be devastated if he lost. A lot of people make that decision before they even click. Some people have already been arguing for their guy for weeks before the episode even comes out. When you have a matchup like Goku vs. Superman or Mario vs. Sonic, well, most folks there have already backed their horses before they even left for the racetrack. And this is where I think Machamp vs. Goro excels. The writers had a challenge here. These guys are both kinda the Maroon 5 of their franchises. Everybody likes them, but not a lot of people are gonna say, oh yeah, that guy, he's my favorite. In other words, not a lot of people were gonna go into this super invested in one forearm guy over the other. And this is where Death Battle pulls out one of its favorite tricks to get you invested: the connections. On the surface, it seems like the only reason for this fight happening is that, well, they're two of the most prominent four-armed video game guys. But as you learn about them through their rundowns, between all the powers and the cool abilities and the gigatons of TNT, the writers weave in just enough of their stories for you to see how they parallel each other. Machamp and Goro are both obsessed with strength. They both spend their lives in constant pursuit of power. But they take that idea in very different ways. Where Machamp sees strength as a goal in itself, Goro trains to conquer and to win. Goro wants to crush his opponents. Machamp sees his opponent as an ally in the quest to become stronger. Goro is the prince of a half-dragon warrior race. He has a pride that Machamp does not. Machamp isn't royalty. In fact, this Machamp isn't even the strongest Machamp. When we see Goro, we see the apex of the Shao Kahn species, the mightiest of their warriors. When we see Machamp, we see an average, garden variety Pokemon. This even comes up in the presentation and the editing of their rundowns. Goro has this intense, gory story of guts and glory, while Machamp is just that's a nature documentary. This isn't a guy, this is a species, this is a creature. Because of his royal pride, Goro sees strength as a way to assert dominance and prove his superiority, while the humble Machamp sees strength as a way to help others. You might be able to tell who I was rooting for, but hey, a lot of people out there like to cheer for the bad guy. I should know. I only wanted the evil Bionicles when I was a kid. The last ingredient to a good analysis is just being entertaining. You know, have some cool edits. Throw in some wacky feats like Machamp tossing a fat rat into orbit. Make a couple jokes about Boomstick's ex-wife. I feel like the host jokes add an important layer to the whole series. Little riffs between Wiz and Boomstick are a great way to break up the pacing, but they also make a more rewarding experience for a longtime fan. It's fun to pick up on the bits of lore and feel like, yeah, I am being rewarded for consistently watching and paying attention to this. There's something here just for me, the guy who doesn't just skip straight to the fight. This gag here, where Wiz awkwardly tries to comfort Boomstick, is kind of funny if you're coming in blind, but it's 100 times funnier when you know these guys. I love these guys. They're good guys. But you can't get too lost in the sauce here. Because remember, the purpose of the whole rundown is to prime you for the main event, the fight. The fight is the most crucial part for an episode to get right. It's the most memorable part of the episode. It's in the title of the show. If the best analysis segment known to man gets a mediocre fight, people will still give it a 6 out of 10 at most. But what makes a good fight? It's simple, actually. A good fight is the payoff to all the setup that happened in the analysis. Everything, all the cool powers, all the big numbers, who the characters are, it should all come together here. Mention a cool ability in the rundown, show it in the fight. Mention a character trait in the rundown, show it in the fight. Again, because it just can't stop winning, Machamp vs. Goro is so good at this. Not only do they show off almost every cool skill mentioned in the rundown, they show it interacting with the other fighters' skills in an interesting way. Goro uses his weapons, but Machamp uses knockoff to get rid of them. Goro uses his fire, and it activates Machamp's guts power-up. Goro tries to do Big Stomp, Machamp counters and does Big Throw. My favorite part is how they pay off the Pokédex entry that says Machamp can throw 500 punches a second. Towards the middle of the fight, Machamp tries to do it, but since Goro is the better trained fighter, he's able to block and counter. Then, after getting the Guts power boost and disarming Goro, Machamp does the same thing again, and this time it works, and he can do the funny All Might reference. Ugh man, look at that camera work, it's so good! But as any Jackie Chan fan can tell you, good choreography is only half the picture. The difference between a good fight and a great fight is storytelling. It's important that the flow of the fight be driven by the two fighters and their personalities. And this is where the animators really get to shine. Because for a fight like this, the story is in the details. It's not just the punches, but how the punches are thrown. Goro is as pissed can be. At every chance, he is going for the kill. He wants this duck out of his house now. Meanwhile, Machamp, he's just trying to have a cool fight with the bigger Machamp. He's going for a knockout, not a kill. These interactions really say it all. When Machamp had the chance to grab Goro, he went for a bear hug. When Goro grabs him, he goes straight for ripping him in half. But when Machamp still manages to hit him, Goro loses his patience and chucks him straight through a wall, leading to the second best moment of the whole fight. You already know what number one is. But storytelling, remember? There has to be a climax to this. And here, the climax is when Goro rips off Machamp's arm. Machamp starts to get serious when Guts comes out. I mean, he rips off Goro's arm first. But when Goro rips off his arm, that's when Machamp gets mad. That's when he locks in. That's when he realizes this isn't just a normal Pokemon battle, and that's when the fight is basically over. But right here in the final moments, we have one last effect of a great analysis. It lets you hope. If I were rooting for Goro and I saw this, I might think, it's all over. There's no way Goro can win. But then I might remember that in the rundown, they covered a time when Goro was in this exact situation and still managed to take down Kenshi. I might think, of course, this is where they're gonna do the iconic Goro Zero Arms comeback. Anyways, Machamp does a funny All Might punch and sends Goro to rip in pieces, and it ends with a silly little gag, the kind you see in an episode of Pokemon. All in all, it's a solid 3-minute fight. And really, most matchups don't need anything longer than that to do what they need to do. You don't have to use every single move both fighters have. Just use the coolest ones. The music is also important. 4-Fist Death Punch is one of the greatest tracks of all time. But I don't have anything to say here that I didn't say last time, so just go check that out. Finally, we have the last ingredient of a great episode, the post-fight analysis. A good post-fight is a little less complicated than the first two, since it only has one pretty cut and dry purpose: make you understand why the winner won. That's why most of the post-fight is usually just them putting all the cards on the table. Here's the biggest calcs, the biggest numbers, all the stuff we were holding back before to make it seem a little more even, when actually, it's a Machamp sweep. Remember a few seconds ago when I said this only had one purpose? That was a lie. Death Battle actually has a devious scheme that only rears its head during these precious last few minutes of the episode. Here's where they give unsuspecting viewers their first taste of the horrid depths of versus debating. Death Battle, in revealing all their research, shows the combination of hard numbers and judgment calls necessary to reach a solid verdict for this kind of question. The structure of this post-fight analysis in particular breaks down pretty cleanly to show both of those. First, the speed calc to show Goro's one advantage. Then the strength calc to show how much stronger Machamp is. Then the reasoning that since Machamps fight each other in the wild all the time, Machamp must be as durable as he is strong. All leading up to the conclusion, Goro never stood a chance. Death Battle is really valuable as a gateway to versus debates for those sicko freaks like me and probably you who are into that sort of thing. You don't just get a cool fight. You get a cool fight, and usually a solid example of how to go about analyzing these matchups so that you can get really annoying about it on your next Discord night with the fellas.
Looking at the stats here, if map lusted, Dora wins mid-diff 7 out of 10.
Well, I don't know about that, because I don't think Superman wins this fight, like, ever, but I don't think Dora does either. She doesn't have the sauce she needs to beat him. I think it's a draw.
She can literally control stars!
And then you finish off with a trailer to get you excited for the next fight, when the whole thing is just gonna happen over again. These are the bones of what people like about a good episode. It's a pretty basic story structure, really. Rising action, climax, falling action. It's simple, and it's effective. All the nitty-gritty details you could get into, like characters being in character, the tone, the boomsticks, dad jokes, they all come from these few basic elements. Hype up the fight, pay off the hype, give a solid explanation. Look at your favorite episode, or hey, even a less favorite episode, and you'll be able to see where they succeeded or failed at doing these three things. Really, what I'm trying to say here is that Columbo vs. Light is gonna kick ass.